When people hear the Dirty Dozen, they think of the 1967 World War II classic, a brutal, gritty, and darkly humorous action film about a group of convicted military prisoners recruited for a suicide mission behind enemy lines. The film became a cultural touchstone, with unforgettable performances by Lee Marvin, Charles Bronson, Jim Brown, and Telly Savalas. But what many casual fans don't realize is that in 1985, almost 2 decades later, a sequel aired on television, The Dirty Dozen: The Next Mission. Unlike the big-screen bombast of its predecessor, The Next Mission was a made-for-TV movie, bringing back Lee Marvin as Major John Reisman and Ernest Borgnine as General Worden. It was directed by Andrew V. McLaglen, a veteran of war and Western films, and it attempted to bridge nostalgia with new thrills. But how did it measure up? Let's dig in. In the 1980s, television was in the midst of an action revival. Shows like The A-Team and Magnum P.I. were captivating viewers, while cable TV and VHS were resurrecting older films for new audiences. This nostalgia wave brought renewed interest in military stories, especially those with ensemble casts and rugged anti-heroes. MGM, recognizing the enduring appeal of The Dirty Dozen, greenlit a sequel. But rather than going the theatrical route, they opted for a made-for-TV movie. The reasoning was simple: lower risk, built-in audience, and a chance to revive a well-known brand. But there was a problem. Most of the original dozen didn't survive the first movie. So how do you do a sequel without the cast? You bring back the man who led them, Major Reisman, and create a new Dirty Dozen. The Next Mission opens in 1944, just before the Allied invasion of Europe. The Allies are preparing for D-Day, and intelligence suggests that a group of high-ranking Nazi officers, including SS General Dietrich, are planning to assassinate Adolf Hitler and sue for peace with the Western Allies. If they succeed, it could drive a wedge between the Western Front and Stalin's forces in the East. Enter Major Reisman. Once again, he's asked to do the unthinkable, recruit a team of military prisoners for a near-suicidal mission, this time to stop the Nazi generals from killing Hitler. Why? Because the Allies want Hitler alive to ensure the total defeat of Nazi Germany. And any premature peace with a Nazi faction could backfire catastrophically. The new Dirty Dozen are assembled in familiar fashion: convicted killers, thieves, deserters, and one insubordinate officer. Among them, a knife-wielding psychopath, a demolition expert, a former mob enforcer, and even a reluctant war hero who refused an order and got court-martialed. It's the classic men with nothing to lose formula. The new Dirty Dozen are assembled in familiar fashion: convicted killers, thieves, and deserters. It's the classic men with nothing to lose formula. The group trains under Reisman's tough love approach, intense drills, psychological manipulation, and strict discipline, before being dropped behind enemy lines. There, the mission rapidly devolves into chaos, gunfights with German soldiers, betrayal from within, and a brutal assault on a train. Lee Marvin's return as Reisman is the centerpiece of the film. Though visibly older and grizzled, Marvin slips back into the role with ease. His hard-nosed style, dry sarcasm, and deep voice anchor the movie. Unlike in the original, where Reisman was reluctant and abrasive, here he feels more like a battle-worn veteran who's accepted his fate, always assigned to impossible missions, always playing with human lives. There's a deeper weariness in his portrayal. Ernest Borgnine as General Worden. Ernest Borgnine reprises his role from the original film. Still scheming, still pragmatic, Worden now serves as Reisman's handler. Borgnine adds some continuity and gives the film a dose of credibility. He's one of the few survivors of the original cast, and his presence is both nostalgic and functional. The new Dirty Dozen. The rest of the cast is made up of lesser-known TV actors, but several stand out. Ken Wall as Louis Valentine, a hardened but principled mob enforcer. Valentine becomes the film's de facto second lead. Wall brings charisma and streetwise toughness. Larry Wilcox as Tommy Wells, a clean-cut officer turned prisoner. He's the conscience of the team, filling a similar role to Clint Walker's character in the original. Rico Ross as Joe Hamilton, a former boxer with a chip on his shoulder. Ross adds both muscle and emotional depth. Sonny Landham as Sam Sixkiller, the Native American demolition expert, echoing Jim Brown's Jefferson from the original. While none of these actors rival the original cast's star power, they each fill a role in the formulaic Dirty Dozen archetypes: the loner, the psychopath, the strongman, the rebel, and the moral center. Comparing the next mission to The Dirty Dozen is both inevitable and a bit unfair. The 1967 film was a big-budget, big-screen epic. It was subversive, violent, and packed with A-list talent. It had a nihilistic edge and a biting critique of military bureaucracy. The 1985 sequel, on the other hand, plays it safer. Being a TV movie, it's constrained by lower production values, more sanitized violence, and simpler character development. The scale is smaller, and the action less visceral. Yet it tries to replicate the formula, the ragtag team, the brutal training, the mission against all odds. And to its credit, it does succeed in capturing some of the tone. There are moments of camaraderie, flashes of dark humor, and a few gritty action scenes that hint at the original's legacy. Still, the next mission lacks the raw power and transgressive energy of the first film. Where the original questioned the morality of war and the expendability of soldiers, the sequel feels more like a straightforward adventure yarn. Strengths and weaknesses, strengths. Lee Marvin's return. Marvin elevates the material with his sheer presence. He brings authenticity, authority, and history to the role. Pacing and structure. For a TV movie, it moves quickly. The setup, training, and mission are all well-paced, with few slow spots. Old-school action, practical explosions, real stunts, and shootouts. There's something satisfying about watching real pyrotechnics instead of CGI. Weaknesses. Lower budget. The limited budget shows in the sets, costumes, and action sequences. It doesn't feel as grand or immersive as a war film should. Flat characters. Outside of Reisman and Valentine, most of the new dozen are underwritten. They lack the distinct personalities that made the original ensemble so memorable. Predictability. The story hits familiar beats without subversion. There's little surprise in the plot and no real moral ambiguity. Despite its limitations, the next mission retains some of the thematic DNA of its predecessor. Redemption remains central. Each man, no matter how flawed, is offered a chance to die for something bigger than himself. It's not forgiveness, but it's a form of penance. Loyalty versus pragmatism comes into play as the team debates the morality of saving Hitler. It's a shocking reversal of the usual goal in a war movie. Instead of assassinating the Führer, they're trying to save him to serve a larger strategic objective. Authority and individualism once again collide. Reisman's disdain for bureaucracy and willingness to bend the rules echoes his original portrayal. He's the anti-establishment warrior, respected by soldiers, distrusted by generals. The Dirty Dozen, the next mission, was a modest rating success. It was followed by two more made-for-TV sequels, The Deadly Mission 1987 and The Fatal Mission 1988, with Telly Savalas, who played the psychotic maggot in the original, returning in a different role as Major Wright. The franchise, by this point, had evolved into a sort of war-themed action anthology, recycling the core idea, criminals on suicide missions, without the nuance of the original. Still, for fans of the genre, the next mission remains a decent entry. It's not essential viewing, but it's a curious what-if. What happens when you try to resurrect a gritty war classic on a TV budget? In the end, The Dirty Dozen, the next mission, is a relic of 1980s television, a sequel that exists in the shadow of a cinematic titan. It's not a great film. It's not even a particularly good one. But it's interesting. It's a film that tried to recapture lightning in a bottle. And while it falls short of the original's brilliance, it offers fans a chance to see Lee Marvin one last time in one of his most iconic roles. In that sense, it's a tribute, not just to a film, but to a style of storytelling where flawed men do terrible things for the right reasons, and war is never as black and white as the uniforms suggest. So if you're a fan of the original Dirty Dozen, or just curious about 1980s war films, give The Next Mission a watch. It may not be essential, but it's a fascinating detour in the road of war cinema history,